For now, let's turn to Mark White, who's got some breaking news for us as Just Stop Oil protesters are blocking yet another road. Mark, what's going on?
Tom, yeah, another day, another protest, and it's back on the A4. You'll remember yesterday outside Barron's Court in West London, the A4 completely blocked during rush hour for a couple of hours. Well, here they are now. This is near the Natural History Museum. One roadway, the police have been very prompt here, has already been cleared, and officers, these specialist protester removal teams are in there. The reason they're in there is because protesters have glued, or some of them at least, have super glued their hands to the roadway there. And what has to happen is these teams have to use solvents to dissolve that super glue and then get them up. Now you can see this gentleman here, he's doing what is now a familiar ritual, just lying non-compliant in police parlance, just ensuring that you need 3 or 4 officers to lift him to the side of the road, and then eventually he'll be put into the police van. So this is going a bit quicker than it did yesterday, but it just depends really on where the police resources are, how quickly they can respond with these removal teams and then get the people off the main road so that the traffic in and out of this very busy arterial route down into central London can start flowing again. It's deeply, deeply frustrating for these motorists that are being held up for sometimes hours at a time. And we've noticed a marked change this week in what's happening here with people coming out of their cars to remonstrate with the protesters. As you see, another one being loaded into the back of that van and not... Well, now she's in the van, she seems to be sitting herself down, but she lost the use of her legs completely before that. That's a remarkable recovery from her. Other protesters at the side of the road here just being patted down and checked because although they don't expect them to have any kind of dangerous weapons, they're not going to put them in a police van, take them to custody with the possibility that they could have any dangerous items on them. So they have to go through that procedure, and all this takes time. It's a process, and I was saying before that people are deeply, deeply frustrated, the travelling public who are being held up here, and we've noticed this week with motorists coming out of their vehicles, other members of the public, pedestrians walking by, actually remonstrating with the protesters, telling them that they are very selfish for what they're doing and that they are not actually helping their cause. The protesters themselves are completely unapologetic. They say we're in a climate emergency and they are justified in taking this action. As I say, that's their viewpoint. You get a different viewpoint from those that are being held up and inconvenienced sometimes for hours with what is going on here. So the process underway now, as you can see.
Yes, we're looking at some really fascinating images of just how gentle the police are being with, I presume, Tiffany or Tamara or Tarquin or whoever it is who's sitting down there. What can you tell us about the demographics of these protesters? Because I don't want to rush to judgment, but they do seem overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly middle class.
Yes and yes on both those points. What you have is a mix, really, of people who are generally tend to be probably professional types, retirees, and in amongst them some students as well, which tends to be the demographics of a lot of these protest groups. Now, in terms of you're talking about the way in which the police are interacting with these protesters, well, that always depends on what the police are met with. If they are met with aggressive, violent protesters, then they will respond in kind to defend themselves and ensure that these people are dealt with and arrested. But when you've got protesters who are very peaceful but non-compliant, obviously not wanting to move, then the police aren't going to go and move in and start harming these individuals. They just want to remove them from the roadway to ensure that the traffic can flow again. The difficulty is, though, I'm seeing the same faces coming here day after day because it's a revolving door in the process of dealing with these people, ungluing them, arresting them, taking them, processing them at a police station, giving them a court date perhaps at some time. But in the meantime, they're back out and they're doing exactly the same thing the next again day, which is why, of course, the Home Secretary wants to reintroduce legislation to Parliament to get tougher and to dangle over these protesters the threat of jail terms if they can get these injunctions through to stop these protests in key areas of London and elsewhere.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for bringing us that. And it does seem extraordinary because this is one extreme of protesting here in this country. And we're talking about the very extreme response of perhaps a threat of being behind bars at some point.